Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Yes, my brothers, how you doing?
Alhamdulillah, good.
That's
Good.
good, man. That's good. Yeah, all good this side, man. It just seems you guys are a bit synced, so you're speaking together. But I'm sure we can get through that. But yeah, it's just a bit of wet weather and still very warm. So yeah, other than that, it's all good, man. It's time to sort of reminisce or time to talk about the stuff that's been kicking off in the last week or so. But before we get on, is there anything anything interesting you guys want to share?
Did you guys see that news that came out from? It's not new. Okay, it's not really news, but I found it interesting in that Facebook are doing that thing on their platform whereby it sends people messages to say someone that you know becoming extreme. Did you see that?
No, I'm not friend. No.
Okay, they're basically, so they're trialing it in America at the moment. You know how sometimes when someone posts something to do with COVID, and you automatically get a message under it to say, be careful of COVID disinformation, go to this government website to get the facts, and don't just listen to anybody on social media. You've seen that, haven't you?
I'm sure I have.
Yeah, you'll see that whenever you just post, if you post anything with the word COVID in it, Facebook's algorithm automatically puts a message at the bottom saying, beware of COVID disinformation. So very similar to that, what Facebook are now doing is they're putting, if they feel that anybody's posted something on social media that, someone may have seen that they deem extremism, they will then put a similar note below these posts or message the person to say you might have come in touch with someone with extremist views, and it's kind of a mechanism to get people to report their friends and family if they feel that they're being so-called radicalized.
Mad.
I thought that was interesting. So I don't know if you'd come across that or not.
No, that is really interesting. Did somebody tell you that they received a message about you? Is that why you brought this up?
No, nothing like that. They haven't done it in the UK yet, but I'm sure it will happen. This is the thing. When they talk about radicalization and extremism, it's promoted in that way that it's supposed to be like far right wing kind of stuff. But we know as Muslims that even if we put anything that talks about the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it being implemented and the golden ages of Islam, and we talk about that in a positive way, we know from a Western point and a democratic point of view, from a democratic values point of view, they see those Islamic views as radical and extreme. So going forward, whatever things you post about Islam in a more of a political nature, you naturally fall into that bracket.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? As soon as you link Islam with politics, then obviously it's
the alarm bells are ringing. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Okay, guys, inshallah, that is really interesting, Rash. Maybe if we get more information about that, we can chat about it a bit more detail next week. Before we start, just there's a bit of crackling and stuff that I can hear. So if you guys can try to keep your mics as if you're not moving it around or something like that, if you know what I'm trying to say. But cool, inshallah. Let's make a start anyway. So the first thing I think it's worth kicking off with, and which has happened in the previous week, is the death of Donald Rumsfeld, the ex-US Defense Secretary, and he passed away on the 29th of June at the age of 88. Now, this guy, there's a lot to speak about in regard. Well, guys, can you, if you're making noise, guys, please leave it on mute.
I think after the Washington Pound.
Yeah, it sounds like it, man. Guy, Afi, man. I know you've been domesticating and stuff, but just keep it down, yeah. So people have got a lot to say about Donald Rumsfeld. But what I wanted to ask question and get your views, guys, is some people champion this guy as a hero, American hero. What legacy does he actually leave behind, and how should Muslims view his legacy? What do you guys think? Anyone?
Anyone who wants to start? Okay. Yeah. No. I don't think it's just from a Muslim perspective as well. I think a lot of people, and they should have been saying this before he died, but since he died, you have seen articles come out, even to an extent in not mainstream Western media, but other certain channels still, which have highlighted his involvement in all of the torture that taken place in the likes of Afghanistan and Iraq, and that he was the architect behind
Abu Ghraib, like Abu Ghraib and stuff like that. Yeah.
So a lot of people are saying this is a man who, on his obituary, on his gravestone, right at the top, should have written on it that this guy is a war criminal, and because of him, millions of people have suffered. So, and very few people, other than those ideologically aligned to him, will really be saying that he did anything good. Because, like you say, at the end of the day, this is the person who came out with the whole weapons of mass destruction garbage, as well as a lot of the American-led wars. So I think everybody is looking at it and saying, look, his accountability, that his accountability is with Allah. Now he's going to have to face the consequences of all of those horrific, despicable actions that he did in this world.
Yeah. The other thing is that this guy's been around since in U.S. politics in the 1950s. So obviously he's an old timer, and he's the chief architect of establishing the neocons. Remember back then when Bush came into power and stuff, and then he formed the neocons with Bush and Dick Cheney, Wolfowitz, all these war criminals.
Wolfowitz.
Wolfowitz, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and many others, Colin Powell as well, and so obviously he's got a lot of blood on his hands, and his legacy is the war criminal. He's got blood of millions of people on his innocent people on his hands, and even obviously the Muslims are cursing him, and also I don't think even the non-Muslims have got anything good to say about him because they know what he did. He's of secular politics.
Yeah, to me it highlights, the fact that they try to do this a lot. You must have noticed this, that when someone dies or someone is no longer in office or in power, they blame that individual for the crimes that were committed, but under him, and no doubt he has got a lot to be blamed for, but they often try and detach the individual from the state. So as if Abu Ghraib and as if Guantanamo, as if all of these things didn't continue and get even worse even after Rumsfeld's time, and as if those things are not there still now, and as if the US foreign policy isn't as barbaric as it was then. So just to associate those things with him, which we should do in terms of accounting and highlighting, but don't detach that from US foreign policy, because that continues to this day and will continue going forward.
Yeah, exactly. Afi, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple of points, if you like. One with regards to Muslims, and then the other with regards to non-Muslims.
Okay.
I think with regard to Muslims, the majority, and the vast majority, so overwhelmingly most Muslims will see this guy for what he was. They remember that he was one of the advocates for invading Iraq because of this claim for I think he went off and made bold statements like, we know exactly where these weapons of mass destruction are. It wasn't even a case of they may not, let's find out. He was saying, look, we know where they are. So he was very instrumental in the invasion of Iraq, and then it was well known about the role that he played in Abu Ghraib. I mean, even the Senate committee reports that were done turned around and said it is impossible for these abuses, not just knowing that they were going on, that they would have carried on without him knowing. So this was a case of him being completely implicit in the abuses that were going on. This wasn't a case of him knowing about it. This wasn't a case of a cover-up. This was him knowing and then allowing it to happen. So, Muslims haven't forgot. Where I want to talk about now is the minority of Muslims who perhaps want to give this guy the benefit of the doubt because they don't know what state he has died in. And, although, yeah, there's a minutiae of a chance. And when I say a minutiae, to the point whereby it's very unlikely that this guy accepted Shahada and died a Muslim, we as Muslims need to judge by the apparent. And this is the principle that Muhammad Sallallahu laid down with his own uncle. The fact is that we judge by the apparent, what is in front of us. Let's not speculate about what might be or what might have happened. He was a kuffar, an instrumental one in the war against Islam. He has the blood of majority of millions of Muslims on his hands, and that's what I hope he burns in hell, and he has a really severe punishment for the atrocity that he's committed. So that's what my view towards Muslims would be. And now I just want to flip it to non-Muslims, and if there's any non-Muslims listening, I just want you guys to think about a certain point, right? Which is, at the time of the abuses in Iraq and Abu Ghraib, everyone turned on Rumsfeld. Like Rash said, he was a scapegoat. He was made that, look, this is not what the administration is about. This is not what America is about. This isn't what we're there, even though this is a high-level official in the administration who effectively carried out these atrocities. So he was made the scapegoat. And what happens in the West, and it's not just in America, is when someone dies, they we saw it with Philip a month or so ago. When people die, they don't recall what these people are remembered for, i.e. the atrocities, the controversies that these people laid out for. And the same thing will happen with Rumsfeld, where people will say, look, good, bad, whatever, he defended his country, he fought for his country, and he represented his country, and therefore people are going to try and label him for his patriotic role as in part of the administration and leading the country, and they'll gloss over the atrocity that he's done. And you can't lose sight. This man is renowned for those atrocities. So why gloss over them? Why are you then forgetting about it? And it's the same thing. I just want to draw a comparison with Colston, Edward Colston in Bristol. This guy was a known and active slave trader. This wasn't something that he did out of being forced into it. He made money from it and made a lot of money out of the abuse of many, many black people for slave trade. And what happens is, after his death, they bloody put a statue of him up, because they remember him for the role he played in for the local economy and the people of Bristol, and effectively for the country, without actually remembering that this man carried out atrocious acts upon a number of black people for money, which is the same what Rumsfeld did, which is the same as Churchill did, many more before them and many more after them. And these people need to be remembered for they are, instead of you lot being duped into thinking these guys were some sort of heroes representing you.
Yeah, loads of points there. Bro. I mean, what I would say is for people listening, or generally everyone really, that what we should look at, we should look through the false narrative. I remember watching Michael, I'm sure it's Michael Moore's program, and when he was talking about the US invasion of Iraq and stuff like that, and there was one clip where Donald Rumsfeld, he's explaining how in the Tora Bora Mountains you have these high-tech, sophisticated caves where you have a full-on control center, tanks. You got room for everything in there, basically. And what Michael Moore was saying is that, from the psychology of people, sometimes the bigger the lie, the more chance it is people are going to believe you. But what we should think is whether someone's a Muslim or whether someone is just from a human point of view, to think that yes, this guy would have made decisions, but like you said, he can't be seen as a scapegoat. Why is it that we live in a time that, based on lies about weapons of mass destruction, a land was invaded, a people destroyed, from there, loads of problems that we see today began with, whether it's, your ISIS and whatever you want to call it. People now living lives where miserable lives, they don't get electricity, they don't get water, there's so much corruption. All of this can only be ignored by normal people, I believe, is if we subconsciously see the people on the other side as of lesser people, that their lives are probably not the same as ours. Otherwise, we have to look at it and think, look, why is it that we do everything? I mean, just say COVID, for example. Look how much precautions we put in place and how much we're willing to follow the rules for our own safety. But here we have governments in the West that are going and destroying lands, killing millions of people, children, women, elderly, and leaving their lands in destruction. But that's not something which we're holding anyone to account. I think, you know, for everyone, I think that's something to really think about. There's a lot of double standard that's going around.
You know, how you link it to COVID, that's something when I talk to anybody who's not Muslim, I do highlight, because, you know, in the times that we're in now, there's a lot of people who are skeptical about the COVID narrative that the government puts out. They're very skeptical generally about what the narrative the government puts out. I would ask any sincere non-Muslim to go, you know, if I can question the government narrative on things like that, why don't I question the government narrative of Islam? Why don't I question why these governments are so, you know, that they're willing to spend billions and billions to cause issues in the Muslim lands? Why do I believe their narrative that these Muslims are coming to attack me from these Muslim lands when I know Muslims myself who are not like that? I think hopefully more and more people are realizing what the government narrative of Muslims and Muslim lands and Islam is in a very similar way to any other disinformation that they may get, is because there's an agenda there. There's an agenda to suppress the real understanding of Islam. And if you're a non-Muslim and you don't know about Islam and you continue to listen to the government narrative, this is the time to take a step back and go, wait there a minute, maybe there is more to this Islam than what this government wants to promote to me.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rash. I also want to make you mentioned groups like ISIS. Rumsfeld and America itself has killed more people, in particular Muslims, than these organizations have. Yeah, and these organizations, it is just on the issue of deception and lies and how they manipulate the truth and how they get the people in the West, non-Muslims in particular, to believe a certain narrative. Is that these groups, they have been created by the intelligence services themselves, for their own agenda and objective.
Isn't it ironic that, like you say, they call those people terrorists, but the ones that create the most terror amongst innocent people are these Western nations themselves? So aren't they the real terrorists? Firstly, like you've just highlighted, they're the ones that are responsible for millions and millions and millions of deaths, yet they call those people who, yes, have killed people, call them terrorists, when actually Western-led wars has created more terror amongst civilian masses by a long way than any of these so-called organizations, which we know the roots of which are skeptical in itself. You know, there's question marks over where these organizations came from.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, the issue of the creation of these organizations. I'll give you an example of the ISIS leadership. They were locked up in a prison in Iraq. Their leadership was under American control.
Camp Booker.
And they were released even without a charge or anything. They were just released upon the Muslims in the region, just to create havoc and chaos and bring bloodshed. You know, so you got innocent people, innocent Muslims in Iraq who are in prison without trial or anything, without committing any crime. Then you have these people who become the leadership of a terrorist organization, which are released by the Americans. So it's up to the non-Muslims and the Muslims as well to actually do research and question the government, their nation states, what they're doing. It's as if their governments are not to blame for anything. It's just these little organizations which create bloodshed. But when the state does it, it's not up for debate or question.
Yeah, I think the points that that everyone's making are sort of banging on. The points that Afi and Rash made also, the fact that, you know, you have to call it as it is. What we're seeing here is, and like you said, Imi, all it requires is a sincere heart and, you know, a deep search of information. The information is there. It's not just to follow the information as it is, to look between the lines, and then you will see that there's a big game being played. that everyone is being played at a different level. Just one example I can give you is a normal guy who, is doing tax fraud. I'm not saying it's a good thing. He gets done. But the real tax fraud is being done on a very, very high level. So in the same way, we might have, like, for example, you had the issue a few days ago. You had this American guy who was actually, he was a PhD doctor. He just randomly shot two Afro-Americans, okay, killed them. And, turned out this guy was like a racist Nazi and all that. But for the last 4 years of Trump, the language that was used, people are going to point at this guy and say, yeah, this guy was guilty. But what about all the guys at the top of the power who have the power? They're absolved of their guilt. So, it just seems that I think, the advice that I would give really is for people is just to look between the lines. Don't just follow the narrative. And I personally believe that a big struggle that governments are having today is, in the old days, before social media, before internet, you had one narrative, and that was the newspapers, and that was the official narrative as the government narrative. Now what you have people independently, being able to share what's happening with video, with audio, with whatever. And then it's difficult for the government to be able to promote their line. They will try to do so, but it's up to people, normal people, to actually look out to the alternative news, to the alternative sources of information that are out there, and not just believe anything they're told. You understand? That's my view.
Yeah, Mike, just to add to that, I think what the governments need in every country in the world, be under dictatorship or under disguised dictatorship like it is in the West. I think they need the masses to be in line with their agenda in order for them to be able to execute their plans. So if we look at the war in Iraq, if the masses were against it, and as the war became prolonged, they needed they needed to avoid the pressure from the people in order to sustain their presence, and therefore public opinion swung using the media. And I think what you got to, when you observe the media, I think that what's on the TV is designed to support the government narrative, like what you guys are talking about. It's there purely for that purpose. And the way you can tell this is news should be reporting the facts, which is an event that has occurred, and just tell you that this is the event. The news, what they tend to do is give you a narrative around the event, and there is always an element of conjecture from what they're doing, because what they're trying to do is saying this has happened, but this is why it's happened, and they never tell you the why it's happened bit, because that's where people can draw their conclusions. Actually, does this make sense to me? Where's the evidence for this? What's this linked to? Actually, that doesn't make sense because last week you told us this happened. So people need the why in order to establish whether the news is accurate in its reflection of the reality that they're presenting or not. And this is where the wider reading comes into it, because the news, the BBC News or the TV News, Fox News or whatever, CNN or the newspapers, they're not going to give this to you. However, if you go and look into the speeches that politicians are making, the speeches the politicians are making to big businesses, to think tanks, to the institutions which support and back them, you will get the evidence for the true narrative. And this is never going to be presented on the news, because they know that there's a chance that the people will turn on it, because this narrative, the narrative that they're presenting, that the events are taking place to protect the average person, is not in fact true. And if the true agenda becomes clear, then people will definitely turn on their governments.
Yeah, no, valid points there. And I think that it's really a responsibility on each and every one to make sure that they don't fall into that trap. And so, just to sort of round up the segment of Don Rumsfeld, what I would say is that one thing his death signifies is that this guy made the most ludicrous accusations about weapons of mass destruction. And like Afi said before, it's not like whether they have it. He's on record to say they're actually in this area. They were never found, and people just move on. Right, Tony Blair's come out and said, "I was sorry," but you know what? in normal life, if someone was to wrong you in this way, I don't think you just accept a sorry and let's move on. So really, it's I think that Bush era of people like Bush and Donald Rumsfeld, this really should be a sign for the normal average person, and definitely not to believe what they're being told and to do some research for themselves. So I want to move on to a next segment or story over the last couple of days, actually, from the land of Palestine. And what we see is that there was a issue going on for, I think, around 4 weeks, where there was a outpost. It's called the Evyatar outpost, south of Nablus, which was actually occupied for about 4 weeks by Zionist settlers. Now, I think it was on Friday, the settlers, they actually left, and this was sort of shown as being a huge victory. You had people like, you even had like Hamas, senior members of Hamas, talking about how this was a victory for the resistance, and how that they need to continue doing things like this to force the settlers to leave. But what confused me, and this is something which I'd like to get your views on, is if you look into actually what happened, there was a deal between the Naftali Bennett government, the new coalition, and the settlers. And what the deal was is that they would leave and go back to where they came from, not originally, just to some other settlements. But the homes that they built, they'll stay standing. And actually, a military base will be established where that land is, right? Which actually they say is legal. And then also, after this, the Defense Ministry, they'll actually perform a land survey, right, to determine whether this land can be claimed by the so-called Israeli state. And if it is, then they've come out and said, well, what we'll do is we'll just build a civilian religious school there. So what's confused me is that on one hand, there's celebration of victory, and also like some of the people are saying this is like a template of removing other settlers from occupied areas. But at the same time, if you look at the details, actually, what's the difference between settlers being there or now they're actually being a military base there? And later on, these lot are saying that they will actually pass through whether it's legal and a part of Israel. What do you expect they're going to say, right? So I'm a bit confused, guys. Hopefully you can shed some light on that. What's your thoughts on that?
I'll share for myself. I think first the way this story has appeared in the media causes suspicion for me. If we look at what's happened with the hardliner of Netanyahu, and we knew he was stumbling badly in his last few days, and then we had the attacks on Al-Aqsa during Ramadan, which heightened the emotions of the Muslims. So therefore, we know that there was a massive reactions for the first time that I can ever remember with the Muslims in terms of their inaction regarding Palestine, and there were calls for in fact there were calls in many quarters for the armies to go and reclaim Muslim land. So that issue had to be nipped in the bud, and it had to be calmed down. So for something like this to happen so soon, to appear like actually, the noises the Muslims have made, or the what the Palestinians have done in that area, has somehow resulted in a victory. But like you're saying, there is no victory because they haven't been able to reclaim that land. They may have moved some settlers across who are probably going to into the Muslim area in Jerusalem and carry on taking over Muslim land there. So it isn't a victory because those buildings are still there, and there's going to be a military post. So this, I think, shouldn't give anyone a false sense of security or a false sense of achievement, that something positive has achieved. There's a new government, it's less hardline, and the fact that there will be honoring some decisions or discussions, and therefore that there's going to be a true dialogue when it comes to Muslim land, because that is definitely not the case. And there's no evidence that on this issue that is what's happened.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, to be honest with you. And it may well seem that the settlers are going, because I mean, the settlers are really despicable people, to be honest with you. They harass and they attack and they do all sorts. So I can see probably in one way why people are, are happy to see the back of them from that immediate area anyway. But I think that's a really good point. That, I mean, what it does show is that two things. One thing is that this new government that's brought in, it was meant to be a change from the Netanyahu's time, in the sense, like, they're meant to be a bit more moderate. It's a bit more, it covers the different aspects of the Israeli society. So to them, it looks like, okay, these guys have come in. This would have been unheard of under the Netanyahu. So maybe there's progress with this new government in place if we sort of cooperate. And the second thing also is, like you're saying, that especially from the sort of quotes that that I was reading, the people that were promoting this as a victory, a lot of their angle was that this victory is down to the resistance of the people, like protesting and so on. So we need to just emulate and duplicate this same process in different areas. If you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you know what we need to look at is, this is not to comment on this, is not to undermine the efforts of those people who are resisting, not in the slightest, because obviously they're there trying to do whatever they can to prevent these settlers from taking their lands. So that's
Exactly.
completely understandable. But from the outside, what we need to do is highlight where there's political games being played against the Ummah. And those things sometimes you can only see from the outside. You can't always see those games from the inside. And I
Sure,
think
sure.
this is where, remember, we said when this new coalition government came into play, we said that
Mm-hmm.
there are people in this coalition government who are on different ends of the spectrum when it comes to their ideological way of thinking. There's left, there's right, there's Muslims, there's centrists, there's
Yeah.
loads of them. And we said the only thing that binds them is their want to get rid of Netanyahu. So, I agree with Afi here. I think there could be, politics at play here, where this is how easy it is to cause a rift in this new coalition, because there are some in that coalition who are supporting the settlers. Equally, there are some in that coalition that are supporting the Palestinians. There's some in the coalition that are outright calling the settlers terrorists. So
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, how that's so easy to cause a rift in this coalition, and in within 3 weeks of this coalition being formed, there's disagreements. So it could well be that causing these disagreements is like Netanyahu's way of trying to get back into position of influence. So we don't know yet, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we need to be careful not to fall into the traps that are actually being set up by the enemies of Islam in the first place, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, yeah, sure. I mean, there's a voice note which I'm gonna play, inshallah. Someone's got a point to make across, so just play that now.
Please, let's not make the mistake of using Muslim in place of Palestinian. Not all Palestinians are Muslim. Just to be clear, when you use the Muslim word, you're making it a religious battle instead of a political right battle.
Okay, Jazakallah khair to the sister for that comment. Any of you guys want to add to that comment, or maybe respond?
I think the issue is like, and again, it requires a much deeper discussion. But she's right in that, firstly, or not all Palestinians are Muslim. That's fair comment.
100%.
So
Yeah,
that is
100%.
worth highlighting. That so when we keep saying Muslim, we're not. There's representation of people who are not Muslim there as well, who are also
Yeah,
being oppressed. So no
of
doubt,
course.
in that respect, I 100% agree with the comment, because, or that part of the comment, because we do need to clarify that there are other people being oppressed, not just Muslims. However, where I disagree is that this is a Islamic issue. This is a theological issue, and to make it just a political issue which is devoid of religion is to completely not understand the issue at all, because the actions of the illegal Israeli state are built upon Judaism well, not built upon Zionism, sorry. They are built upon Zionism, and the only way to rectify the situation and bring it back and have it solved is to bring forward an Islamic solution, an Islamic solution which previously was able to give security to all people within those lands, be it Christians, be it Jews, be it Muslims. Anybody who knows their history, anybody who reads their history will realize the only time that there was peace here is when Islam was the Muslims ruled the place, and other people were able to practice their religion in peace. What we see today is the Zionists there, who because of them they are oppressing everyone. So to make it not a religious issue is also not to understand the issue either. And again, I know that's a very quick answer, but it's a lot longer of a topic to discuss, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure. I think also what I would say add to that as well is I think maybe whichever background you're coming from, you will see it in that way. So, for example, you have people who are maybe just say not Muslim, who view this as a apartheid issue, a humanitarian issue. So they'll come from a human rights point of view. But as Muslims, who as Muslims we know that we need to refer all our matters to the Quran and the Sunnah, and look to Islam for solutions for all of life's matters. There's something which every Muslim knows, and we are the ones who submit to Islam. So we submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His commands. So it would be very difficult to look at any issue in the world devoid of an Islamic lens, or looking devoid of an Islamic solution. So we see that the Palestine issue is an Islamic issue. It's an issue of occupation, and I think the point that Rash made is a really good point, and it's needed, I think, to clarify the fact that what we're talking about a return to the status quo, where the land was administered and ruled by Muslims, but the people of other religions were living there, and they progressed with their life. And in fact, a lot of people look back to those days as the golden days, when they were allowed to, abide by their religion. And one thing that's important to mention as well is that, when at the time in Ramadan, when Masjid al-Aqsa was under attack, also from what I've heard, reports are that some of the churches and some of the main churches in actually in Al-Aqsa, in Al-Quds in Jerusalem, were also being violated and attacked. So certainly this is an issue which needs to bring peace and security, but that can only be brought by the Islamic solution to this problem.
I think I 100% agree with you guys, and I think the question raises a really interesting topic, which is how they label something a political issue, like as though religion is somehow devoid from it. And like you guys said, this is an agenda definitely in the Muslim world to try and secularize Muslims, and a Palestinian issue is being done really, really strongly, whereby what they are trying to encourage in the countries surrounding them is that this issue is a political issue just for the people of Palestine. And you're right, they don't even say Muslims, they just say Palestinians, as though they group everyone together like it's their issue. But like Madhu and Rash, you have said, this is where we need to actually clear up that smoke screen that is being placed in front of us, refer it back to our criteria, which is Islam. Allah and His Messenger have clearly shown us the way that we need to live our lives, and then link this issue back, because this is an Islamic issue which concerns all Muslims. And I think if we gave the impression, the fact that we're referring to everything that happens in Palestine like the Muslims are doing it, and in some cases it might appear that it's non-Muslims, 100% agree with the person who made the comment. However, what we're focusing on is what should our reaction as Muslims be linked to our criteria, irrespective of the event. How does this concern us? Does it concern us? If so, what should our reaction be?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I think it is. I think there's two things there. I think one could be a discussion of whether the issue of Palestine is an Islamic issue. It's just a nationalistic issue. And the other thing is like what Afi said, is whether Islam and politics have any link. But yeah, really important. So I want to quickly just move on to another issue, which is linked to the issue of Palestine. So we're going to stay in this area. Just wanted to know what your thoughts were to the visit by the actual foreign minister of the occupation force, Yair Lapid, to the UAE. And whilst all this stuff was cracking off in Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah, where Muslims were being attacked, and places like Masjid al-Aqsa were being targeted with skunk water, what we see is that during this time, Mr. Lapid visits the UAE to meet Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, and also to inaugurate the Israeli embassy and the consulate office in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's it goes without saying, because obviously one of the first states to normalize ties with the occupying entity was the UAE, but things are really speeding up. But I mean, I think it's part of the normalization process, where they want other countries to partake in it too. And I think obviously the occupying entity does want more normalization to take place in the region to make it more acceptable, for the occupation to be acceptable. But there was another article article that I was reading where in the UAE embassy, next to the British flag, they put the LGBT flag. And
yeah, I was going to come to that one after this. But
okay, right. Let's take this one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The reason why I brought this, and just to sort of add my thoughts to it, is what we see is that there is a disconnection between what's been happening at a governmental level and the normal people. Surely, if you agree with me there, that people wouldn't be happy that these visits are happening. But like you said, I think they are really pushing ahead with this normalization. So I don't know if Rash,
yeah. So I don't have any other thoughts apart from that. It's just part of the normalization process that's taking place.
The only thought,
the
only additional thought I had is to do with the fact that, when the most recent, obviously, bombings in Gaza was happening, a lot of people were saying that, when these normalizations were originally signed, or by these countries, certainly UAE and Bahrain and stuff, that, there has to be some conditions attached, isn't there? The condition must have been that, we'll normalize with you, but you have to make sure that for as a bare minimum, you're not bombing Muslims. Look what happened. The bombing continued, but these normalizations weren't undone. Like people who completely, incorrectly try to link these normalizations with the Treaty of Hudaybiyah and stuff. And I think you spoke about that previously. Say even it was some kind of a treaty, yeah, and say you somehow dubiously were able to link it to Sira and method and Sharia and that there was some justification for it. Well, haven't they broken that treaty then? Haven't they, by bombing Muslims and throwing Muslims out of Muslim lands, haven't they broken that treaty? So what happened to undoing your normalization? Instead, what you see is these sellout rulers and these sellout countries, instead, what they're doing is they're further making the normalizations tighter. So it just highlights the nature of these leaders, and that they are not there for the interests of Muslims. They are directly actually enemies of Islam. And we need to highlight that. And I think more and more people are aware of that. I don't think that goes without saying now. I'd like to think.
No, some good points there. I mean, I didn't want to go to that story which Imran mentioned about the rainbow flag, but there's a couple of comments which I think is worth listening to see what people have got to say.
Go for it.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I'm Irish, and my connection to the Holy Lands is Christianity. Now, maybe the creation of the state of Israel and how it was created was wrong. But like, do you think the Jewish nation should have their own state? And what, like, it's like a yes or no question. Should the Jewish people have a state so they can be autonomous?
Okay, Hogan, thanks for your comment, mate. What I would say to that is, look, if people want to have a state, then that's fine. But why should it be at the expense of somebody else? I mean, people refer back to what happened in the Holocaust, the dreadful events of World War II. But in all fairness, wouldn't it have been more logical to give part of Germany to people to set up a state, or some other places? The reality is we're not again saying that they shouldn't have a state, but here what you have is people not from a land who have gone to that land and removed the people, massacred them, oppressed them till today. Just because those people need a land, that doesn't sort of wash away the crimes that are being committed. So that's what I'd say to that. And there's another comment, inshallah, I'll play that as well by Ibn Salim. Okay, let's listen to what the brother's got to say.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Hope you're all doing well, inshallah. Excuse me. I'm actually here in the United States, so it's cool to be able to interact with my brothers in the UK. Alhamdulillah. I did want to piggyback on one point that was made, which is you are seeing that this Palestinian issue trying to become secularized or liberalized. That it's just like another Black Lives Matter movement. Oh, it's just like the LGBT movement. People are just fighting for their rights, and it's like, no, that's not what it is at all. We're talking about an Islamic issue, specifically an Islamic issue, and we're talking about a place where Allah Subhanahu wa Taala called a blessed land. He called this a holy land. This is also the place where the Prophet ﷺ ascended into the heavens on his journey for the Isra wa Miraj. So it is 100% an Islamic issue, and yeah.
Wa alaikum salam, brother Ibn Salim. You know what? That's just bang on. I could not have said it myself any better than you said it. So Jazakallah khair for your comment. I don't know if you guys want to add anything onto the brother's comments, guys.
Yeah, Mike,
Yeah,
can I add?
Go on.
Yeah, I just want to add something to the comment that you made about, give the Jews a homeland. Yeah, fine. This is a case of people defending their homeland, or the Jews have come in and taken over a land. I think let's make a clarification here. This wasn't the Jews coming over and saying, look, we want to live here, or naturally trying to integrate into a land. This is specifically the Europeans and the American administrations saying that the Jews should have a land, and that's the land that they're going to have. And they've dictated that Palestine is the land they're going to have, despite people living there, having ownership of the land. They've come in, ripped it from them, and then carried out atrocities over these people. So the fact is that all these people who are now coming out like Mr. Hogan and saying these people should have a land, yeah, mate, we all up for it. But the ones who are advocating for it, the ones like Britain and America, give them your land. You're the ones who are protective over this issue, and you're really emotional issue. Give them part of your land, which is going spare. Why do you have to come in and steal the lands of the Muslims?
Okay. Some fire there from Brother Afi. Imi, I think Rash, you guys want to respond to Brother Ibn Salim's comments?
Yeah, a couple of things. First one about the question of a Jewish state. Just like everyone else is saying, that there's no problem with a Jewish state, but it obviously depends where it is, isn't it? Yeah. So the issue of the Europeans committing the crime against the Jews, and it's the Palestinians who have to do the time for it, get punished for it, when they had nothing to do with it in the first place. Yeah. So they could have a state anywhere they want in the world, but to come and destroy someone else's land and actually physically, literally steal their homes, occupy their homes, obviously that's everyone would tell you that that's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Oh, sorry.
go on, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, the second point was regarding the brother's question from the state. The point from the states is that they're definitely trying to secularize the issue, because the issue first started off Islamic issue, then it became an Arab issue, then it became a Palestinian issue, then it became a West Bank, Gaza Strip issue. So from the overall picture from the Islamic issue, it's become something which is really small and minute, which excludes the Muslims from solving the problem based on the Islamic solution.
As a ummah.
As an ummah, that's right. As an ummah.
Yeah, exactly. Bang on. Rash, you want to make a point?
Yeah, mine just really quick on the first one for Hogan. If he wants to go back and and listen to what I said earlier on, because at the end of the day, no one's saying that people don't have a right to have somewhere to live. Look back at history and my point that I made earlier, like when the Jews themselves had somewhere to live and they were looked after and they were able to practice their religion, and compare that with what the Zionist state of Israel is doing to Muslims today, and then I think he'll get his answer. And I think the other brothers have made some fantastic points about, why steal someone else's land then if you need somewhere to stay, and the people who are promoting you are the US and Britain, who were involved in the Balfour Declaration in the first place. Well, if you signed the Balfour Declaration, then you give some of your land then, rather than giving away Muslim land. So I think that's the bottom line in there. And then Brother Salim's comment, excellent comment. Really agree with every point he made there. And what I would do is a little plug, because we've done a number of podcasts on this topic of Palestine. There's a podcast called the Talking Dean podcast. You can get it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and we've gone into this issue in a lot of detail. So much more detail than we can cover in today's discussion. So if you have a chance, brother, I would, we'd appreciate it if you had a listen to that, and then maybe provide your comments in future sessions like this, inshallah.
Yeah, that's a good plug, bro. It's a good plug. Okay, guys, time's ticking, and I want to end this soon. I did say that there was one issue that Imi mentioned about, so I'm only going to be fair to say, Imi, I'm going to let you talk about this, but we've got a few minutes for this one. About the rainbow flag at the British Embassy in the UAE. Imi, what's happening there?
Yeah, the flag was raised next to the British flag in the embassy, and then the UAE government said that, look, we're not allowing the rainbow flag to be hoisted. But
Who
the funny thing is that
they didn't say that.
The UAE
I'm
did.
sure.
They had an issue with it.
Okay.
With the flag itself. But what it is that there's two things there. First of all, they're normalizing ties with Israel, and they're happy to fly the flag next to their embassy, but they're not happy with the rainbow flag. Yeah, and people, the reports that I was reading is that the UAE did this kind of on purpose, meaning that they hoisted a flag on purpose just to gauge the public opinion on the issue. Yeah. And in the future, there will be relaxing the laws regarding related to LGBT, and to make it more open and more free. So they just wanted to gauge the public opinion to find out, to see what the public are saying on this matter. But in the future, the analysts and some of the politicians, they were saying that this is what a lot of the Arab countries do, that they put these things out to gauge the opinion, and then they go for the solution.
What I heard was, and the other guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is from my understanding, the British Embassy is sovereign land, basically. So it's part of Britain, and from what I know, I don't think the UAE has any jurisdiction to tell them that they can raise a flag or they have to lower it. From what I've read is that the main issue of concern was from the normal Emirati people who were complaining about this, and the Emirati government, they made some sort of comment that showing a bit of displeasure. But if you actually read into it, a lot of the analysts were saying that most likely, like 99%, that the British would have passed this by the Emiratis, because it's a big issue. It's not a small issue, and told them they were going to do this. And the fact that they would have allowed it goes back to what you're saying, in me, is what these governments tend to do is they allow to gauge and test the waters And if you look at in the UAE since the last year, a lot's been changed. A lot of the rules to do with alcohol, to do with the mahram and these laws, they have been changed. So this is a signal that the rules to do with homosexuality and pride and stuff like this is going to be something which is going to be relaxed, if not made, not compulsory yet, but make it, that it's allowed anyway. So that's why I understood. But the main point I took from it was that the normal people were not happy with this, which is positive in my opinion.
Yeah, sorry,
Mike,
sorry, you're right there, Maj. It was on the British embassy, but at the same time, they hoisted it on the American embassy as well, but they didn't raise an issue with it. But when it was on the British embassy, that's when the issue, the backlash started.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this story, guys? I
think there's 2 points. I think firstly, it goes to show. Actually, no. First, I think let's look at how UAE operates as a police state. So you had the issue of the Jewish delegation coming into UAE for a historic first, and there was relative. Not that much. Well, it didn't appear to be a response from people. Yet on this issue, they allowed the response. So there's no censoring, and the response was allowed. So was it as a means to divert people's talking? Because these talks, people are talking about the issue about the Jewish delegation, albeit not publicly. And this is then, if you allow them to voice their discontent over an issue publicly, then that becomes the focal point. So they would much rather have the LGBT issue, and albeit just an issue from 2 embassies, and let people pacify their emotions by allowing them to speak, and therefore you let the other issue go. But yeah, it was the response from the people and some ex-ministers over what the US and the UK did.
Yeah, some good points. Anyone else want to add anything onto that? Rush? No,
not really. I think the brothers have said it. No point repeating what they've already said.
No, that's cool. Inshallah. So I mean, we sort of run out of time, and there are a few comments. I'm just feeling a bit bad that we've not played them, but it's just going to be addressing them is going to take probably a lot longer. I mean, I don't know if you guys think we should address them, or should we sort of end it?
Why don't we
listen to them, and then if we can't address them now, because even some of the questions that were raised earlier, I think, like you say, they require more elaboration than like a 1 minute monologue from one of us. So I think maybe it'd be worth to, even if we have to address them later.
Let's have a listen, then we'll sort of bring it to an end soon. Yeah. Okay. Inshallah.
Yeah, thanks for the response there. I think it's Muslim podcast. What was I going to say? Well, like, a bit of the problem is that there were so many like in the continent, in the old Holy Roman Empire, the Third Reich, whatever it's called, the Germany, Poland, all those countries. It was pretty evil, and I don't think they're going to have their own state like that. It would have made another world war. It made it World War III. But I was thinking the only other place that they could have had a Jewish state and been world peace is one city, Manhattan Island, the state of New York City. That should have been the counter. And the truth is, most of the influence is from New York and parts of Russia. So the state should have either been in Russia, some old Soviet part, or New York City.
Yeah, Hogan, I'm with you there, man. Let's listen to your next comment.
Listen to Mantronics. I never took it from that perspective. When they raise flags just to provoke the public to see the true nature of how a society feels. That is a real eye opener. Thank you, Mantronics. I'm definitely following you. That's a new one for me.
Yeah, Mantronics,
excellent
you got to follow him, man. Yeah, brilliant comments, Hogan, man. Enough respect for your time. listen to this and to contribute, man. Hopefully, we can get you on the next one. So, guys, I want to end it at that point. Really, thank you, Jazakallah, for everyone and for you guys, and also for everyone who participated. Whether it was, I can't even remember the names now because they're gone. But everyone that maybe made a comment, thanks for that. And hopefully, we'll catch everyone on the next one.
Inshallah.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having us.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, no problem, man. See you later. Bye.
Take it easy, guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.